Let us pray. At the beginning of this week, we ask you, Father, to renew and strengthen in us the awareness of our duty and privilege as members of this legislature. We ask you also in your divine providence to bless and protect the Assembly and this province we are elected to serve. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Notices of motions. Introduction of bills.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce a bill being the Health Disciplines Amendment Act 1986. Mr. Speaker, among other things, this bill permits the establishment of expert committees before the decision to designate. It amends the appeal processes. It adds the psychiatric nurses to the schedule under the bill and also changes the name of the respiratory technologists to respiratory therapists.
Minister of Labour has moved first reading of Bill number 34, Health Disciplines Amendment Act 1986. Does the Assembly agree to this motion for first reading? Opposed, if any? Carried.
A bill being Health Disciplines Amendment Act 1986, introduced by Honourable Dr. Reid, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I request leave to introduce a bill being an act to amend the Municipal Government Act. Mr. Speaker, this bill, if adopted, would amend Section 164B of that act through the insertion of the words "and cats" after the word "dogs." The bill would allow municipalities to license and otherwise control cats in the same manner as is now provided for with dogs. This bill will not itself directly provide for the licensing of cats, but would enable municipalities to exercise that option if they so choose.
The honourable member for Calgary Mountain View has moved first reading of Bill 265, an act to amend the Municipal Government Act. Does the Assembly agree? Opposed? So ordered.
A bill being an act to amend the Municipal Government Act, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Hawksworth, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill being the Crow's Nest Pass Municipal Unification Amendment Act 1986. Mr. Speaker, this bill provides for ministerial orders to do things similar to those provisions in the Municipal Government Act, which will now apply to the municipality of Crow's Nest Pass if this legislation is passed.
The honourable member for Pincher Creek Crow's Nest has moved first reading of Bill 37, Crow's Nest Pass Municipal Unification Amendment Act 1986. Does the Assembly agree to this motion for first reading? Opposed? Carried.
A bill being Crow's Nest Pass Municipal Unification Amendment Act 1986, introduced by Honourable Member Mr. Bradley, is now read a first time.
Mr. Speaker, I move that bill number 37 be placed on the order paper under Government Bills and Orders.
Having heard the motion by the Honourable Government House Leader, all those in favour please say aye. Opposed please say no. Carried.
Tabling returns and reports.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to table the financial addendum to the report of the Chief Electoral Officer on the general election of the 21st Legislative Assembly, Thursday, May 8, 1986.
Introduction of special guests. Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the first question to the Minister of Labor. Mr. Speaker, on Friday, in announcing his Labor Law Review Committee will do some globetrotting in the usual high-rolling conservative style, the minister said that the committee will visit at least, I believe, West Germany, Britain, and Washington, D.C. My question is, can the minister assure the Assembly that these are the only places the committee will travel to, or if not, can he tell us what other countries are being considered for a visit?
Mr. Speaker, I can't give an absolute assurance. What I said was that those 3 countries would be on the itinerary. We may, we may add others according to the indications. I've been reviewing a large amount of briefing material to do with different countries and their legislation.
Well, it looks like it could get bigger and better. Mr. Speaker, can the minister tell us how large, surely most people operate from a budget, how large the travel budget for the committee is, or is money of no concern at all?
Mr. Speaker, the concern of this committee and the process that we have started upon is to thoroughly review the labour legislation of Alberta, to discuss with the general public of Alberta, with employees and with employers, other concepts that may or may not be advisable to introduce into the Alberta context, and we will do that job, as I said, thoroughly.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I take it then that there's no budget. We can just keep paying and paying and paying for this nice little trip. But it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, to the minister that the official opposition has in the past received excellent and thorough information from the legislative research services on labor legislation in various countries. My question is to the minister, before deciding to jet off all over the world, did the minister do any comparison of the cost of sending the committee to the library, the legislative library, for a while as opposed to sending them on a world tour?
I must say, Mr. Speaker, that having been back in the Assembly since last Thursday, I'm delighted that the Honourable Leader has finally got round to questioning about labour legislation. The situation is that, and the Honourable Leader should know this, if, as I have had, he's had much experience in the area, labour relations are not just a matter of the statutes. Labour relations are essentially a matter of attitudes between employer and employee, or between employer's representative and employee's representative. We wish to not only study the statutes in other jurisdictions, but to find out how they work from those who are directly working with them. That cannot be done in Alberta, nor in the Library of the Assembly.
Supplementary question. There's 8,000 people gave you their attitude out there. You could have moved by now instead of setting up a world junket, Mr. Minister. My question to the minister, given that there's a good variety of labor legislation in Canada from other provinces, why is the committee focusing instead on going outside to foreign jurisdictions that surely are not applicable in this country?
Mr. Speaker, unlike the Leader of the Official Opposition, and unlike many of my constituents who belong to organised labour, and unlike the gentlemen who've been on the front steps of the legislature for some weeks, those people are different from the Honourable Leader. We believe that not all wisdom is to be found within the provincial boundaries of Alberta. There are concepts elsewhere in this world that may well improve the labour climate in Alberta, and in fairness to the people of Alberta, those should be studied.
Supplementary member for Clover Bar.
Mr. Speaker, has the minister given any consideration to including Sweden or some of the socialist countries in the studies? Because the minister is well aware, he and I were on the Legislative Committee on Workmen's Compensation, and Sweden was one of those stops, Mr. Minister.
Mr. Speaker, having reviewed the briefing material that's been presented to me, I'm attempting, and the committee will be meeting for the first time tomorrow, and I will be encouraging them to provide input. We're attempting to cover a spectrum of other countries. Sweden is a socialist country, at least the government of Sweden is a socialist government at this time. On the other hand, other countries have had socialist governments at some times and conservative governments at others. The labour legislation is not necessarily related to the calibre of the current government. Whether or not we will go to Sweden, I doubt it, in view of going to West Germany, which by and large has somewhat similar legislation, but it may be that Sweden, and it may well be that other countries will be on the itinerary.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon, supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, it would be interesting to see what he comes back from Uganda and Saudi Arabia with, but to save time and to save money, will the Minister be splitting the committee up so there'll be 2 or 3 going to different countries to come back with their different reports rather than the whole committee going to every country?
Mr. Speaker, we have not considered Saudi Arabia, Uganda, Bulgaria, or the USSR. The situation is that in view of their responsibilities and the nature of the people that have been selected for the committee, the intention is to have the whole committee travel together. The interaction between the members of the committee is just as important as the communication with the representatives of employees, employers, and the governments in those other countries.
Second main question, Leader of the Official Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to direct the second question to the Minister of Consumer and Corporate Affairs. Mr. Speaker, in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia, age, sex, and marital status are not used as factors in determining automobile insurance rates. In Alberta, on the other hand, auto insurance companies are still allowed to discriminate based on these factors, despite the recommendations of the Human Rights Commission and despite the Charter of Rights. My question is to the Minister, when is the government going to move to change this situation so the formula based on actual driving records of individuals is used instead?
Mr. Speaker, in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia, automobile insurance, of course, is offered by a company that is owned by the government. And it is my information that the rating practices of those insurance companies have nothing to do with statistics or experience or any of the traditional methods by which insurance is indeed actuarially calculated.
Well, supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. That's true. It's based on actual driving records. And I'll say the question again. When is this government going to stop discriminating and base their rates and tell insurance companies that they have to follow this and based on their driving record?
Perhaps, Mr. Speaker, I could clarify. The word I used was actuarial as opposed to actual. And in insurance practice, the prediction is not necessarily based on driving records of an individual. It is indeed based on the experience, loss claim experience of a group or class. In Ontario and in Alberta, it is that very tried and true practice that the insurance industry has been following for many years. There is, until July 1st, 1987, there is under the Individual Rights Protection Act an exemption granted to the insurance industry in Alberta. And that industry is even now studying the possibility and indeed gathering statistics which it will come back to us with next year.
Supplementary question then, following from the Minister's answer, Mr. Speaker, saying that I believe it's Order in Council 399 and 85. What is now then, we know what the position of the government was then, what is now the position of this government on this matter? Are they going to bring in another amendment or an order in council, or will they move to end this type of discrimination?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there is not going to be any precipitous action by this government on this issue. I'm always reminded that in days past it was a compliment to say of someone that he has discriminating taste. Discrimination means making a difference where a difference precisely exists. The protections that we have in Alberta are directed to drawing a distinction where no difference exists. In the insurance industry, the differences exist. It is one of those cases in which there is very properly a distinction drawn between one group and another. Also, I would bring to the Leader's attention an amendment that was passed to the Individual Rights Protection Act which allows reasonable discrimination, I think is the way it's worded in the statute, although I may be corrected in that regard. I would also point out that there is a case in Ontario, it's called the Bates case, and it is this very issue that is being now litigated, and we are watching that case with interest and will continue to do so.
Well, that's nice that you're watching with interest. The young people who are being discriminated against and paying huge amounts to insurance companies will really appreciate that you're watching it. Yeah. My question is that Section 15 of the Charter of Rights guarantees equality before the law and protection against a number of things, but discrimination based on both sex and age. Has the minister determined whether or not the insurance industry's ability to discriminate in Alberta based on these two things, age and sex, does in fact violate our Charter of Rights?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that is asking for a legal opinion, and therefore I cannot give any answer to it.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon, supplementary.
Supplementary to the minister. Would not the minister inform the legislature that they will launch an action to get the legal opinion she says she cannot give now?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I did not say that I cannot get a legal opinion, but once again, let me draw the member's attention to the case that is being argued on virtually this very point in Ontario. It is arising out of a human rights case. It has been before, I think, the High Court of Justice, and it is expected to go to the Court of Appeal of Ontario. And as I say, we're watching that case with great interest.
Okay. Main question, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, through the Speaker to the Minister of Energy, a great deal of confusion is continuing to surround the removal of the petroleum gas revenue tax. And Deputy Prime Minister Mr. Mazankowski has said that negotiations are to commence today towards reaching agreement for its immediate removal, while the Minister of Energy is saying that no negotiations will occur. Now, is the minister not aware that in the absence of a provincial plan, the federal government will step in with their own plan for the money freed up from the PGRT removal?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honourable Leader for providing us with such valuable information. However, with respect to discussions between the federal government and the province of Alberta, we are having officials in our department with officials from the federal department meeting tomorrow to discuss the proposal that the Alberta government put before the Federal Minister of Energy and other important matters related to the energy industry of today. The removal of the PGRT, the federal government is very much aware of our position on that. So in terms of negotiations, there's really nothing to negotiate there. We expect them to remove it and remove it as fast as they can. However, having said that, we are in discussions with respect to the proposal that we put for them, and I'm optimistic that we'll be able to make progress.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, it's nice to know they're negotiating, but they're not negotiating. And has the government met, for instance, with the top 52 producers or so to ensure that $700 million is reinvested in Alberta's energy sector when the PGRT is removed in early September, as the Deputy Prime Minister has predicted?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I have already answered many times over in this House, we are not negotiating the PGRT. The PGRT is an unfair tax, discriminatory tax that the federal government indicated they're going to be taking off, and how they do that is their responsibility. We expect it to, each day we expect it to be coming off. So in terms of discussing proposals, we are looking at other things, and with the expectation that as we proceed to discuss these other things, that it's a given that that will come off as quickly as possible.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, that wasn't the question I was asking, negotiating with the oil companies, but if it's not the case that is it not the case, though, that the Alberta government really has no plan at all, and thus Ottawa is taking strings attached for approval in order to tie up the removal of the PGRT?
If I understand the question, Mr. Speaker. The honourable leader is wrong.
Final supplementary to the minister, Mr. Speaker. Why is the government, this government, not taking constructive proposals to Ottawa in order to safeguard against federal government interference yet again in our energy sector? Our lack of doing nothing will let them in.
Well, Mr. Speaker, obviously the honourable leader doesn't listen. I indicated that in Calgary we laid forth a proposal to the federal minister, and that particular proposal is under discussion.
Supplementary, Calgary Forest Lawn.
To the Minister of Energy, Mr. Speaker. Among the proposals that are going to be discussed, is there one that would improve the cash flow position of the small oil companies, and would you provide details about that?
Mr. Speaker, the proposal that we did present to the Federal Minister of Energy was a cash flow stabilization proposal, and one that is under discussion.
My question is the Minister of the Environment, and Mr. Speaker, it has to do with the Bradbury Industrial Group, which are looking at a wood preservative plant in this province where they'll be using tetrachlorophenols. You notice the real name, Mr. Speaker, and pentachlorophenols. Can the Minister indicate if an application has been received by the Department of the Environment to go ahead with this proposed plant?
Mr. Speaker, no application has been received by Alberta Environment with respect to this proposed plant, although it's my understanding that today an application was forwarded to the County of Strathcona seeking a development permit for such a plant.
Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, can the Minister indicate that the people in the area where the proposed plant would go, will there be an opportunity for the people in the affected area to have an opportunity for hearings and public input?
Mr. Speaker, should the application go beyond, I guess, first reading for a bylaw within the County of Strathcona, it would seem to me that there would be several opportunities that might be required by the Council of the County of Strathcona asking for public hearings or a public meeting with respect to it. I might add as well, Mr. Speaker, that before any approvals would be given for such a plant to be located, it would first of all have to meet with the requirements that are found under the Planning Act in the province of Alberta, would have to meet the requirements of the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Land Conservation and Reclamation Act. And if those requirements are all met, there's still an opportunity, as has been explained previously in the House, for the Minister of the Environment to require an environmental impact assessment with respect to such an application.
Mr. Speaker, in the event and this is sort of in the area of hypothetical, Mr. Speaker, but I think these questions have to be asked, there will be waste which will have to be disposed. Will the Swan Hills plant be available for the disposal of the dioxins which are a byproduct of the process?
Well, we're certainly in the area of hypothetical, but it's my understanding that the Swan Hills Special Waste Facility plant would be able to accommodate an opportunity to break down such chemicals.
Mr. Speaker, does the Minister have any information for the Assembly as to are there many plants that are looking at Alberta, plants comparable to this one, which are looking at locating in Alberta because we will have the disposal site in Swan Hills?
Mr. Speaker, there are no plants of this type that I'm aware of that are looking at Alberta. And from time to time you hear rumors about new types of chemical plants wanting to locate in Alberta as a result of the soon-to-become reality special waste management plant in Swan Hills, but they're only rumors at this point in time.
Member for West Loch Sturgeon, supplementary.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of the Environment, sensing a certain frustration in the answers, I'm wondering if the Minister of the Environment is contemplating changing the regulations to where any plant such as this would have to get an environmental assessment from you first, rather than, as it is now, going through others and coming at you with a tremendous amount of work that's already been done. Why not come to you first?
Well, Mr. Speaker, there's no frustration in the person of the Minister of the Environment. It just happens to be Monday and it's a new week, and one would rather be home than here. But no, there's no intent to change any of the procedures. I believe that the system of government which allows local people to be the first to be apprised of any developments required or requested within their area has always proven us and served us well in the past.
Member for Calgary Mountain View, supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A development permit is something required at the municipal level. For any of the permits that are required at the provincial level, will there be any public hearings required prior to those permits being issued?
Under the provisions that are currently in place, both at the local level and the provincial level, and should there be an environmental impact assessment, should there be an application, the environmental impact assessment would certainly require a public meeting, public hearings that would allow people in the area to voice their opinions and their views, as well as to allow the people of Alberta to voice their opinions and their views with respect to half a dozen particular matters that are outlined in a document that was made public as a policy dealing with environmental impact assessments written December 1985.
Member for Fifth Marion Viking, followed by the member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Culture, in regards to the Tyrrell Museum at Drumheller, could the Minister indicate the public response and usage of this facility from its start-up date till now?
Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Tyrrell Museum, the usage rate passed the 500,000 person mark last Monday, which far exceeds the estimates when the museum was first opened and indeed that were made before the museum started. In terms of the response, I haven't yet received anything but a positive response from the public, both Albertans and those from outside of our province who visited the museum.
Supplementary. Is there any indication in those numbers of the out-of-province or out-of-country usage in those numbers, in the above numbers that you just gave?
Mr. Speaker, there was a survey completed a while ago of some in excess of 900 people who were in attendance at the museum. If my memory serves me correctly, just over half of that number were from the province of Alberta, half the people visiting the museum, almost half from outside of the province, obviously, and there was the large percentage of those from outside of the province were from other parts of Canada, with a significant number, I'd say in the neighborhood of 15% from the United States.
Supplementary to the Minister. In consideration to the fact that there has been no charge to the entry of this facility to date, could or is the Minister or his department considering a gate charge to recover the operating expenses or the administration costs? And have you any indication what those costs are to date?
Mr. Speaker, the member raises an interesting question, and that's whether or not we should, in that particular facility or any number of others that Alberta Culture is responsible for, charge entrance fees. We are looking into the possibility, though I might say that in doing that, we are taking into account the effect that that might have on attendance at, in particular, Tyrrell Museum, but others in the province, and what the cost would be of implementing such a program. But at a time of economic restraint, the member raises a point which is well considered and which the department is looking into.
Member for Calgary Forest Lawn, followed by the member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
Mr. Speaker, my questions are to the Minister of the Environment. Given that some 100 million litres of waste oil are produced annually in the province of Alberta, what assurance can the Minister provide that these oils are disposed of safely?
Mr. Speaker, we've had in existence in the province of Alberta now for a number of years a program called Oil Drop, the Alberta Oil Recycling Program, and there are located in a variety of municipalities in the province of Alberta, I believe some 40 to 45 in rural Alberta and some 250 or so spots in urban Alberta, facilities whereby individuals can take oils and drop them off and have them delivered to storage sites or to two refiners in the province of Alberta that recycle these oils.
I wonder if the Minister could give us some idea of how effective this is, though. What percentage of the waste oils are actually winding up in recycling depots?
It's my understanding, Mr. Speaker, that it's in the neighborhood of approximately 20%. The program has been in existence only for half a dozen or so years, and would be our hope then in the future that in fact that percentage of turn-ins of old oils would in fact rise in percentage as compared to the total.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Does the minister have any plan for legislation that would require a surcharge to be placed on the sale of oil, which could be refundable when the oil is returned to a receiving depot?
There's no such plan at the moment, Mr. Speaker, but it strikes me as being a kind of an interesting idea for a new tax in the province of Alberta. It is my understanding, however, that the two refiners, Hub Oil and Turbo Resources, do provide a small compensation to individuals, a compensation that will range between 1 cent per litre to 10 cents per litre, depending on the distance of the oil drop from either of their refineries.
Mr. Speaker, final supplementary. I have here a petition with respect to environmental problems associated with the recycling depot in Calgary, my constituency. My question is to the Minister of the Environment. Would the Minister outline the steps he proposes to take to ensure that the concerns of these citizens are satisfied with regard to the location of the Hub Oil plant? May I distribute it?
A number of initiatives have already been taken with respect to that plant, Mr. Speaker. In April of this year, an air quality directive was issued that called on Hub Oil to undertake some 9 or 10 changes with respect to their operation. During the time frame, April, May, and June, there were a fair number of calls and letters to my office and offices of Alberta Environment with respect to odors that were emanating from that particular plant. As a result of the air quality directive that was initiated and the changes implemented by Hub Oil, the number of contacts from individuals in that part of Calgary have almost dropped off, I think, to 1 or 2. Because of the amount of interest that was generated with respect to that, I've put a time frame in my agenda for the fall of 1986 to take an opportunity to go and visit that plant and see firsthand what, number one, the plant does, and secondly, to ensure that those things that were directed for the plant to do under the air quality directive have in fact been fulfilled, and to learn more about the plant in question. And should the honourable member be free the morning or the afternoon that I'm in Calgary to go and visit the plant, and should he wish to come along with me, I'd be delighted to have him.
Supplementary, member for Calgary-Buffalo.
To the Minister of Environment, does the Department of Environment have a comprehensive strategy for dealing with not only the matter of waste oil, but for recycling wastes of many kinds in our community, including paper and other types of waste?
One of the major initiatives that's currently going on in 1986 by the Environment Council of Alberta are hearings on recycling. And I've directed the Chief Executive Officer of the Environment Council of Alberta to ensure that he brainstorm as much as he possibly can and deliver to me a report that will in essence cover the widest variety of ranges and options that might be available with respect to this whole question of recycling. I might point out as well, Mr. Speaker, that in a matter of several weeks from now, we'll be making public in concert with the City of Edmonton an innovative program here that will be unveiled in 3 parts of the City of Edmonton dealing with curbside recycling.
Member for Edmonton Meadowlark, followed by the member for Highwood.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Treasurer. The government has from time to time stated 3 objectives for the Heritage Savings Trust Fund: diversification of our economy, income to substitute for our depleting non-renewable resource income, and thirdly, rainy day liquidity. Diversification. Can the Minister confirm that only 5 to 10% of this fund has been allocated to projects promoting real diversification beyond energy and agriculture?
Of course, Mr. Speaker, when you start to become selective in definition of the words diversification, you could limit any number of words down to a very narrow point. I recall the card trick I used to do when I was 6. I'd pick a red 2 of hearts, put it behind the deck of cards, and I knew that was a card, and after a process of selection, you can limit it down to that card. Everyone knows that the Heritage Fund, Mr. Speaker, is performing in a variety of diversifications. If we wish to go through and enumerate some of those diversifications, of course, we do have an opportunity both here and in the Heritage Savings Trust Fund Committee of the Legislature to discuss the appropriateness of those diversification initiatives. But I think it's clear that some of the initiatives are very outstanding moves by this government, and ones which have a lasting and substantial impact, both presently in terms of jobs and economic growth, and in the long terms in terms of real capital formation, generation of longer-term jobs and security of economic growth, and to add something above and beyond a normal budgetary item to the economic future of this province. And that's the vision that we talk about on the Heritage Fund, and I think that's one which has been recognized by the people of Alberta over the past 3 or 4 elections. In the case of irrigation, for example, that in itself must be seen to be an agricultural diversification, where in fact we're upgrading the arable soil of this province to ensure that there's a broader-based irrigation proposal which would protect certain parts of the province from the very vagaries of weather, and as well to add to agricultural upgrading or processing, such as the beef and other kinds of manufacturing potential. With respect to the diversification in education, clearly that must be seen to be a great opportunity to bring intellectual potential here. The Heritage Savings Trust Fund Scholarship Program assists more than 4,000 students every year, and I know that that in itself must be seen to be part of the intellectual diversification of this province. And I could go on, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting that the minister would refer to card tricks, and underlines his verbal sleight of hand in answering some of these questions. Second objective, rainy day liquidity. Could the minister confirm his statement in July in this House that the Heritage Savings and Trust Fund has only about $1.7 or $1.8 billion of real liquidity, and should he note that he will be borrowing this real liquidity for the Agricultural Stabilization Loan Program?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that in fact is true. Through the good management of the resources of the fund, we've been able to use the ongoing revenue from the fund and transfer it to general revenue to an extent of about $1.5 billion, and that essentially removes the need for a sales tax in this province, a unique feature which this province has in Canada. But at the same time, we have been able to manage the liquidity of the fund so that there is, in a short-term basis, approximately $1.7 billion in short-term liquidity. Now, we will not just take that money and transfer it to the small business program or to the farm credit stability program. We may use it on a short-term basis for that purpose, but also on a short-term basis to finance other needs, including the capital fund project and to include the general revenue fund, until we can get in place a longer-term borrowing program. And as I pointed out before, taken some time to outline, I mean, that's a good management position to take, because, of course, as the market varies in terms of its appetite for Alberta government AAA bonds, or as their interest rates tend to change, or as other governments start to enter the market, we have this liquidity that we could use to see us through the short-term period. We're not backed against the wall in terms of having to go to the market for borrowing requirements. And that's why, through a policy of good management, we're able to maintain that liquidity to allow us to make that short-term swing between long-term needs and short-term requirements. Good management of my move, Mr. Speaker.
It just depends how short is short-term. The last of the liquidity is basically gone, is what you're saying. Thank you. Liquidity. Could the minister please tell the House why he continues to include the $2.5 billion of deemed assets in the Heritage Savings and Trust Fund when the Auditor General, this government's own Auditor General, has been insisting since 1978 that this is categorically wrong?
Mr. Speaker, I can speak with some... I can say that, first of all, the term asset. An asset is a use potential. And I can clearly say that those assets within the Heritage Fund that have a use potential are shown as deemed assets, deemed in the sense that they're paid out of the Heritage Fund from the Capital Projects Division, and have a very long-term impact in this province in terms of irrigation, in terms of a lot of the investments which we made to the Capital Projects Division. And I think for sure, Mr. Speaker, the people of Alberta want us to show those up front, because they have a sense of pride in that fund, and they have a uniqueness that they know no other province has, and they want to tell their colleagues across Canada about the advantages and the excitement that the Heritage Fund has brought to this province.
Maybe we should include all the hospitals in this province in the Heritage Savings and Trust Fund. Finally, income. Can the minister confirm that the Crown corporations, which pay most of the interest earned by the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, have recorded in their last reported fiscal years total losses of $350 million? What kind of reliability is there in this kind of income to our Heritage Savings and Trust Fund?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member should take a little longer to do some research. You find out, of course, that any of the deficits of the agencies are funded from the General Revenue Fund, dollars which have already voted by that member, and therefore it's not at all the normal kinds of losses which are found in other kinds of private sector operations. The security of our investment in those agencies is strong. We have allowed the money to flow from the agencies themselves to engender such things as agricultural development, construction, to allow people to have an own home in this province. We've ridden through a lot of adversaries which have gone against the economy of this province by using the Heritage Fund, and the return to the Heritage Fund is good. The transfer takes place between the Heritage Fund and the general revenues I explained, and it maintains the equilibrium between the two funds. Wise investment, good management, and the people of Alberta agree with that.
Entry, Edmonton, Goldbar.
Gee, Dickie must have had a good weekend. Mr. Speaker, in light of the fact that we are running a huge deficit, is the minister in a position to indicate what 1 percentage point of sales tax would do to bring in revenue in the province? I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, the minister's department have done some studies and should have that information. What would 1 percentage point of sales tax do as far as generating revenue to the revenue of the province?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I must say that I haven't recently run the numbers. I recall the member 3 years ago suggesting that the budget of 1982 would include a sales tax. Unfortunately, it didn't come about, and I hope that I'm not the provincial treasurer who is known to be the one who introduces a sales tax.
Member for Edmonton Kingsway.
You probably will be.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, would he consider bringing more and more of the matters relating to the Heritage Trust Fund under the purview of this Legislative Assembly so the government can take advantage of the ideas that members here have about diversification?
Mr. Speaker, there are so many opportunities, Mr. Speaker, to debate the Heritage Fund. I don't have to draw to the members' attention the fact that there is a resolution on the paper on the order paper right now. We've gone through the Heritage Fund appropriation, a full 10 days provided for in the standing orders. It looks like it's adequate because we got them through in 5 days. We have an opportunity in the Heritage Fund Committee, this Assembly. I'd be glad to entertain other ideas, but you know, Mr. Speaker, we need to see the ideas before we can adjust because, frankly, they haven't started to come.
Member for Cypress Redcliffe.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker, to the minister. I wonder if the minister could confirm to the Assembly that the Auditor General is employed by and a servant to this Assembly and not a servant or employed by the government?
For Highwood, followed by Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, my question this afternoon is to the Minister of Energy. A great fire of no small consequence has erupted at the Suncor plant near Fort McMurray. Has the minister been advised as to how many people may have been hurt at the scene of the fire?
Well, Mr. Speaker, to answer the question directly, there were no injuries and no loss of life in the fire that broke out this morning at 5:40. Was under control less than an hour later, and the fire was in a particular unit, the kerosene unit, and there were 2 other units, the naphtha and the gas oil sections, where the fire did not occur into those sections, and those sections will be up and operating within hours.
With all that communication with the Suncor people, has the minister been advised as to the assessment of damage caused by the fire, actual costs?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Suncor investigation team are doing that assessment this afternoon, and hopefully within a matter of days we would be having the results of that assessment. I'm optimistic that this particular unit will be fixed up and will not result in a lengthy delay. We saw a story this morning where it was predicted that the plant would be down from 3 to 6 months. That is entirely incorrect. In just an immediate assessment, you can see that that's not going to be the case.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona, followed by the member for Edmonton Belmont, if there is time.
Thank you, thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Attorney General. In view of the exceptional reluctance of Alberta prosecutors and Alberta judges, exceptional by Canadian standards according to a very recent survey out of the University of Calgary, Mr. Speaker, to acknowledge the rights given by the Charter of Rights to persons accused of crime, what training in the implications of the Charter does the Attorney General propose for these 2 groups of legal functionaries as guardians of the people's rights?
Mr. Speaker, none.
Mr. Speaker, this is not a flippant matter. What general legal training does the department lay on for the prosecutors on the one hand and the judges on the other, Court of Appeal, Queen's Bench, or Provincial Court?
Mr. Speaker, prosecutors are required to be members of the Alberta Law Society, and they must be practicing lawyers in the province or obtain the right to practice. They are hired on the basis of a competition, and in the process, of course, training does take place relative to their responsibilities within the role that they play as agents of the Attorney General in various places in the province. Insofar as training judges, Mr. Speaker, that is not the responsibility of the Department of the Attorney General, nor do I believe it to be a reasonable suggestion that judges should undergo some degree of training by a department of government. Judges are appointed, as members are aware, at the provincial court level by a process after review by a judicial council, pointing out once again, as I've done in the past in this assembly, that provincial court judges appointed in Alberta are processed through that model, which is now being reviewed by other provinces. As far as judges appointed by the federal government, there is more attention being paid now to the process by which judges are appointed in terms of the consultation with the bar in the provinces. But it is certainly not my view that it is the responsibility of the Department of the Attorney General or the government to train judges.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary. What steps, though, does the Attorney General propose to help the cause of liberalizing the thinking of judges by insisting to the Ministry of Justice that political affiliation or support have nothing whatever to do with the appointment of Queen's Bench or Court of Appeal judges?
I'll be meeting with the Federal Minister of Justice early in October, the annual meeting of the Attorneys General of Canada. The interesting notion promoted by the Honourable Member for Strathcona will, if there is time, be brought to his attention.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How much longer will the government of this province tolerate for the highest two groups of judges in this province a method of appointment which elsewhere in the old Commonwealth has for this century at any rate been dead as the dodo because it is so grossly unfair and inefficient, namely by political patronage?
What about the council?
The Honourable Member for Strathcona has heaped abuse upon the judiciary in the last few remarks, which I reject. It's very, very interesting, Mr. Speaker, how one draws the line between heaping abuse on the judiciary and on the system that gets them there. Mr. Speaker, the judiciary in Canada has a remarkable record of impartiality, and despite the fact that some of the judges may have had judicial or political involvement prior to their appointment, they have displayed on the bench, and those who laugh opposite may wish to continue to abuse the judicial system and the judicial appointments and the people who occupy the benches of the judges in this province. I reject that as total and utter nonsense. We have a council in this province which has been cited by the Canadian Bar Association as a model for the rest of Canada to follow. And I reject these slurs on the judiciary of this province. Right.
The Chair recognizes that there's a great deal of concern with respect to at least 2 citations in Beauchesne with regard to the delicacy of this line of questioning, and the Chair requests that the remainder questioners on this take extreme care. Member for Calgary-Buffalo.
Yes, supplementary to the Honourable Attorney General. Does the government have a policy which allows its lawyers to support the application of the Charter in striking down laws from time to time? And if so, why is it the government always opposes application of the Charter in every case, no matter how socially progressive its application may be?
True. The honourable member for Buffalo is included in the supplementary question allegations, which are without basis of fact, and I will not comment on them.
Might we finish this final supplementary with respect to this issue? Opposed? Carried. Member for Red Deer North.
To the Attorney General, to put the people of Alberta at rest, could you give us a clear indication today that your department will not respond to the alarming suggestion by the member from Edmonton Strathcona that the government train and liberalize judges?
We've dealt with. The Minister of Education wishes to give supplementary information. A set of questions is raised on Thursday last and as raised by the member for Edmonton-Avonmore. Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, Thursday last, April 21st, the member for Edmonton-Avonmore raised with me some questions with respect to the Alberta Correspondence School and its service to 43,000 students in this province. The member asked, could the Minister of Education confirm that the catalogue this year will not be available for another 2 weeks? In fact, the catalogue is available now. The member also asked whether there would be fee increases in the coming year, which resulted in a 2-week delay. In fact, I have not and I will not be considering changes to the fee structure for the correspondence school to apply to the 86-87 school year. Thank you.
To the Minister, I'm wondering how the increased costs due to increasing enrollments are going to be met by the correspondence school in view of low increases in the estimates.
The correspondence school will not go over budget as far as I can determine this year, Mr. Speaker, and certainly those estimates for what it would cost to operate were very much a part of the budgetary process.
Orders of the day.
Government motions. Motion number 12, adjourn debate. Mr. Hawksworth.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to speak to motion number 12 this afternoon and deal with it in 3 sort of parts. First of all, I'd like to talk briefly about the process of approving $370 million